Like serious, like my favourite filmmaker, Nick Rogue, made a series of films through that era. Just astonishing.
What ignites a filmmaker who turns chaos into electricity? Danny Boyle doesn't just direct movies, he detonates them. Every frame pulses with kinetic energy.
For making the film. And this is where you begin to expand. You get to actually describe.
Every sequence designed to grab audiences by the throat and drag them into worlds they never knew they wanted to experience. Behind that relentless visual assault lies something deeper than style. It's hunger, pure, unfiltered hunger for cinematic possibility. Boyle approaches films like a vampire, draining them of everything useful before moving on to the next victim. 6 movies became his feeding ground, teaching him that cinema's greatest power isn't showing reality, it's electrifying it. These weren't passive entertainment experiences. They were masterclasses in how moving images could alter human consciousness through sheer kinetic force. From handheld intimacy to hallucinogenic imagery, from working-class grit to surreal fantasy, Boyle absorbed techniques that most directors use sparingly and weaponized them into full-scale sensory bombardment. These masters showed him that subtlety was optional, but energy was essential. Boyle learned that audiences don't just want to watch stories unfold, they want to feel them in their nervous systems, experience them as physical sensations rather than intellectual concepts. These 6 directors became his dealers in pure cinematic adrenaline, teaching him how to transform ordinary narratives into extraordinary rushes. Here are the films that taught Danny Boyle how to make movie-going feel like mainlining electricity, and why his addiction to visual intensity produces the most exhilarating exhaustion you'll ever crave. 6. Mean Streets, 1973. Scorsese didn't make gangster films. He made heartbeat cinema. When Boyle discovered Mean Streets, he encountered something that would revolutionize his understanding of handheld energy. Charlie and Johnny Boy, small-time criminals navigating Little Italy's moral maze, became Boyle's template for characters whose personal relationships generate more tension than any external plot device.
Hey, Mikey, hey, you don't get a drink, me. There's a bear shit in the woods over here.
The film's opening sequence, set to the Ronettes' Be My Baby, taught Boyle how popular music could amplify rather than accompany visual storytelling. Scorsese's jukebox approach, where songs comment on action instead of simply providing background, influenced every Boyle soundtrack that uses contemporary music as emotional punctuation. Michael Ballhaus's handheld cinematography, following characters through cramped bars and narrow streets, showed Boyle how camera movement could create intimacy rather than distance. The famous tracking shot through Tony's bar, weaving between conversations and confrontations, became Boyle's masterclass in environmental storytelling. Every corner contained a different drama, every table held its own tension. Harvey Keitel's Charlie, torn between Catholic guilt and street loyalty, demonstrated how internal conflict could be made physically visible through performance. His relationship with Robert De Niro's Johnny Boy, mixing genuine affection with exasperated responsibility, taught Boyle that the most compelling dynamics happen between characters who love each other despite knowing better. Mean Streets proved to Boyle that the most authentic stories emerge from specific cultural environments rather than generic urban settings. Scorsese's Little Italy wasn't just location. It was character, atmosphere, and moral universe combined into one claustrophobic pressure cooker. Fifth Performance, 1970. Camel and Rogue didn't make a crime film. They performed surgery on identity itself. When Boyle encountered performance, he discovered how narrative experimentation could serve psychological exploration rather than artistic pretension.
I hope it'll be good fun for them. The problem with filming is that it's a bit, in the end, when you get down to it.
Chaz, a violent enforcer hiding from his own criminal organization, takes refuge with Turner, a reclusive rock star whose household operates according to completely different rules of reality. James Fox's transformation from brutal gangster to confused identity seeker taught Boyle how character development could happen through environmental influence rather than traditional dramatic arcs. Turner's house, filled with mirrors, drugs, and sexual ambiguity, becomes a laboratory where conventional masculinity gets deconstructed and rebuilt into something unrecognizable. Mick Jagger's Turner, using androgynous charisma and pharmaceutical wisdom to manipulate his house guests, showed Boyle how rock star personas could translate into cinematic presence.
What do you mean?
It's a man's world.
There's nothing wrong with...
The film's exploration of gender fluidity and sexual experimentation, years before such themes became mainstream, influenced Boyle's later characters who discover hidden aspects of themselves through extreme circumstances. The film's editing style, intercutting between different time periods and states of consciousness without clear transitions, became Boyle's template for sequences where characters experience altered perception. How reality fragments under psychological pressure, how identity becomes negotiable when survival depends on reinvention. Donald Cammell's direction, treating violence and sexuality as equally transformative forces, taught Boyle that the most powerful sequences happen when characters can no longer distinguish between pleasure and danger, between their original selves and who they're becoming. 4. A Hard Day's Night, 1964. Lester didn't make a musical. He bottled pure exuberance and projected it at 24 frames per second. When Boyle discovered A Hard Day's Night, he found his obsession with kinetic energy given its purest expression.
Apple, which is the two surviving Beatles and their widows and the two other widows.
The Beatles, playing fictionalized versions of themselves, navigate fan hysteria and media obligations while maintaining their essential humanity and humor. The film's opening sequence, with the band running from screaming fans through London streets, taught Boyle that chase scenes could be celebratory rather than threatening. Lester's handheld camera work, capturing genuine spontaneity within carefully choreographed scenarios, showed Boyle how technical precision could preserve rather than destroy natural performance energy. Each Beatles' distinct personality, maintained even within the group dynamic, demonstrated how ensemble casts could feature individual characterization without losing collective identity. Their improvisational dialogue, mixing scripted wit with genuine camaraderie, influenced every Boyle project featuring tight-knit groups facing external pressure. Lester's use of jump cuts and nonlinear editing, revolutionary for mainstream cinema in 1964, became Boyle's standard approach to maintaining visual momentum. The film's refusal to explain its editing choices, trusting audiences to follow rapid transitions through pure visual logic, taught Boyle that clarity didn't require conventional structure. The film's celebration of working-class success, showing the Beatles as regular lads who happened to become global phenomena, influenced Boyle's recurring theme of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. A Hard Day's Night proved that the most infectious energy comes from characters genuinely enjoying their own adventures. 3. The French Connection, 1971. Friedkin didn't make police procedurals. He constructed anxiety machines. When Boyle discovered The French Connection, he encountered his masterclass in sustained tension through environmental realism.
It's quite famous now in a way that kind of like haunts you. So if you ever have running in a movie...
Popeye Doyle, obsessed with intercepting a massive heroin shipment, pursues criminals through New York's grittiest neighborhoods with single-minded determination that borders on psychosis. Gene Hackman's performance, combining professional competence with barely controlled violence, taught Boyle how protagonists could be simultaneously heroic and disturbing. Doyle's methods, including harassment of innocent civilians and reckless endangerment during pursuits, demonstrated how good intentions could justify questionable actions when stakes get high enough. The film's famous car chase sequence, with Doyle driving frantically beneath an elevated train, became Boyle's template for action scenes that prioritize practical danger over digital spectacle. Friedkin's use of real New York locations, actual traffic, and minimal safety precautions created authentic momentum that computer graphics couldn't replicate. Owen Roizman's cinematography, using natural lighting and handheld cameras, showed Boyle how documentary techniques could amplify fictional drama. The film's winter setting, with dirty snow and gray skies, created an atmosphere where every exterior scene felt like survival exercise rather than scenic backdrop. The French Connection's procedural approach, showing detailed police work rather than intuitive detective breakthroughs, influenced every Boyle character who succeeds through obsessive preparation rather than natural talent. Friedkin proved that the most compelling heroes are professionals who take their work seriously enough to sacrifice everything else for success. Second, Kes, 1969. Loach didn't make social realism. He excavated poetry from working-class desperation. When Boyle encountered Kes, he discovered how regional specificity could achieve universal emotional resonance.
There are many people who would testify to great devotion to him and to huge inspiration that they gained from him.
Billy Casper, a neglected teenager finding purpose through training a wild kestrel, became Boyle's template for characters who discover transcendence within harsh circumstances. David Bradley's performance, using his natural Sheffield dialect and non-professional background, taught Boyle that authentic casting could generate more powerful results than traditional acting technique. Billy's relationship with his bird, the only creature that responds to his gentleness rather than his social position, demonstrated how hope could survive even systematic neglect. Loach's documentary approach, filming in actual council estates and using local residents as supporting players, showed Boyle how environmental authenticity could amplify rather than distract from personal drama. The film's school sequences, showing casual brutality disguised as educational discipline, influenced Boyle's later portrayals of institutional indifference. The film's Yorkshire setting, presented without romanticization or condescension, became Boyle's model for celebrating regional culture while acknowledging its limitations. Chris Mingus's cinematography, using natural light and handheld intimacy, demonstrated how technical restraint could preserve rather than diminish emotional impact. Kes proved to Boyle that the most powerful stories often focus on characters society considers disposable, finding dignity in lives others might dismiss as hopeless. 1. Apocalypse. Now 1979, Coppola didn't make war films. He manufactured hallucinations. When Boyle first encountered Apocalypse Now,
these movies were just amazing. And, you can think about there's so many of them. It finishes with Apocalypse Now.
he wasn't just watching cinema, he was experiencing controlled madness. Willard's journey up the Mekong River to terminate Colonel Kurtz became Boyle's understanding of how films could assault audiences psychologically while maintaining narrative coherence. The film's opening sequence, with The Doors' The End playing over napalm explosions and spinning helicopter blades, taught Boyle how sound design could create emotional states independent of visual content. Coppola's use of Wagner's Ride of the Valkyries during the helicopter attack showed Boyle how classical music could make violence simultaneously beautiful and horrifying. Martin Sheen's Willard, gradually losing his sanity while pursuing an already insane target, demonstrated how protagonists could become unreliable narrators of their own experiences. His voiceover narration, mixing mission reports with personal confession, influenced every Boyle character whose internal monologue reveals psychological deterioration. Marlon Brando's Kurtz, representing intellect corrupted by absolute power, taught Boyle that the most terrifying villains are those who've reasoned themselves into evil rather than stumbling into it accidentally. The film's jungle setting, where civilization's rules dissolve into primal survival instincts, became Boyle's template for extreme environments that reveal character essence. Vittorio Storaro's cinematography, using practical fire and smoke to create hellish landscapes, showed Boyle how production design could achieve psychological effects that digital technology couldn't replicate. Apocalypse now proved to Boyle that cinema's ultimate achievement was making audiences complicit in characters' moral disintegration while keeping them desperate to witness the conclusion. Boyle learned from these masters that cinema's most addictive quality isn't storytelling, it's sensation. 6 directors taught him how to inject pure energy directly into audiences' bloodstreams, transforming passive viewing into active participation. Pure cinematic narcotic, administered with surgical precision.